Hi, so I just got off work pretty early, so I'm actually gonna head to the beach and hit a quick surf. And I figured while we head to the beach, I'm gonna share with you guys some of my favorite war stories from working in private equity, because number one, I actually think they're pretty funny. And number two, I think you'll actually get to learn what it's like to work in private equity as well as how to be successful in it. So let's hit it. So let me set the scene for you of what I was like when I first got a job in private equity, because at the time, I was this really hungry 22-year-old kid where I just finished the stint in investment banking on Wall Street in New York. And I just spent the last 2 years romanticizing this idea of moving to San Francisco and working in tech and working in private equity. And so I start this job so hungry to make it. And I think it's because at the time, I still really had a chip on my shoulder from growing up of like, I need to prove myself, I need to make it in this world. And so the way that you make it and prove yourself as a junior associate in private equity is by sourcing a deal. And so what that means is that most of the time when you do deals in private equity, it's mostly investment bankers showing you companies, showing you deals. But the very best deals are the ones that you do that no one else has actually seen before, because you actually source and make the opportunity yourself, aka you find some sort of diamond in the rough. Like for us, it was SaaS companies in the Midwest that were these hidden jewels that no one had ever met before. And you actually invest in those companies on a one-off basis where you're not having any sort of competition. And so if you think about what that actually means, is when you're in private equity, the best private equity investors are the best deal makers, aka the people who are slamming the phones the most, trying to actually facilitate a deal. And so you're cold calling a ton. And so I will never forget my first year on the job. I was so hungry to source a deal. At the time, we lived in San Francisco and we worked down in Palo Alto. So it's like about an hour drive with traffic. And so in the mornings, I was on West Coast time at 5 a.m. We'd drive down to miss traffic and also go to the gym. But I was so hungry to source a deal that I would be driving down with my friends and my coworkers driving down into the South Bay, and I would have my phone and I'd have on my notes pulled up all of my East Coast companies that I wanted to call, because I wanted to be the very first person in their voicemail inbox for that day. And looking back, I laugh and I kind of cringe at like how hard I worked and how much I wanted it. Because like, if you think about it, it was 5:30 in the morning, I'm driving, right? And then my friends are like basically asleep, like trying to get some rest before they go to the gym and start their workday. And by the way, I don't approve of this, I don't condone it, but I had on my notes app, I would just be like calling companies and leaving voicemails while driving because I was hustling so hard because I really wanted to get into the very best companies. And so I would be driving and basically be like working my butt off with all my friends' lives technically on the line. And so looking back, probably shouldn't have done that, but I think it really speaks towards just like how hungry I was to make a name for myself and source a deal. And so one of my favorite sourcing stories of me just like pounding the phone trying to get into a company was actually this company called Noregon in North Carolina, which was a lead that was actually passed down to me by one of my partners. And it was a company that he passed to me because I'm from North Carolina. He's like, hey, you know what? This is a company we've been chasing for the last decade to try to get in. Like, let's see if you can actually get in. And so this company specifically, if you look at our Salesforce CRM records for the last 10 plus years, we had multiple people hit it up to the point where it even asked the mayor of the city that this place was in North Carolina to actually introduce us, and we still had never gotten a response whatsoever. And the thing to note is if you think about the very best companies out there, so aka the companies that are growing the best and also the most profitable, aka they're generating profit, they don't have a use for your capital, right? If you're an investor, you're actually in the business of selling a commodity. You're in the business of selling money. And so your money is technically worth the same value as every other investor out there. And so if you think about the challenge of being in your early 20s, trying to cold call the CEO, the founder of a company who's like in their mid 40s, has been running this company for decades, like how are you, this kid, going to build a rapport and actually get them to respond and think that you're worth their time? And so I remember I got past this lead on a Friday at like midday. And if you look up what Noregon does, it does automotive IT diagnostics for semi-trucks, like a super niche business. And so I spent the rest of that day researching the company, like understanding what automotive IT diagnostics actually meant. And basically what I found out was that their main product was this product called JPro, which was like this piece of hardware that you would use to actually diagnose the engine and run a bunch of different diagnostic tests. And so I was like, screw it, I'm going to get certified in Noregon JPro. And so I spent that Friday night, did not go out, studying this specific piece of hardware and software that like only really niche mechanics knew. And then Saturday morning, I woke up and I went to the office and I paid $100 out of my own pocket, and I paid to take the Noregon J-Pro certification, which was literally this like online examination to test mechanics who had been studying this for years on whether or not they could use the Noregon software themselves and actually do a good job. And like growing up as an Asian kid, you know that like you have to pass every exam. You can't just pass, you have to get an A. And you get 3 tries on taking this J-Pro certification. And the first try, I like fail with flying colors, like the opposite of passing. I get like a 45 and I'm like, holy crap, this is the hardest thing I've ever taken. Cause like, keep in mind, I know nothing about semi-trucks at the time. And so I take it again, I get like a 72, and I think the passing score is like a 75. So I have one last chance at taking the certification, and in hopes of potentially impressing the founder and the CEO to actually respond to us and actually talk to us about their business. And so I take it and I squeeze by. I remember I passed by like one specific question, and here I am staring at my computer screen, and it's like, congratulations, you are Noregon J-Pro certified. And I can still picture it, this green banner around this fake diploma. And I remember it was like a Saturday at 3 o'clock at this point. I like not hung out with any friends that weekend. I've worked all weekend specifically on this company, and I print it out and I just take a little thumbtack and I put it on my bulletin board. All to then send an email to the CEO, specifically taking a screenshot of my certification, sending him an email about, you know, connecting over, having similar values, shared background from North Carolina, investing in small businesses, being super excited about the future of their business, and then also flexing that I was Noregon J-Pro certified. And so of course you think like, hey, John, you put in all this work, like they might actually respond, of which they don't. And so this is where the part of the story gets really, really savage, where I actually had a trip to North Carolina a couple months later to go see another company with one of my partners. And we had flown into Raleigh-Durham, which is like one of the main areas of North Carolina. I remember it's like mid-February, it's pouring rain, it's like pretty cold, like mid 40-degree weather. And it's a miserable day. And we have a decent meeting with a different company. And I'm like, you know what if I did a drive-by at Noregon? And so what a drive-by is when you just basically drive by the company, pop in, and try to get a meeting impromptu. But the thing is my flight is in 3.5 hours later, and Noregon is based about an hour and a half from where we are. It's in Greensboro, North Carolina, so about an hour and a half drive in shitty weather, and I don't have a car. And so I turn to my partner after the meeting, I'm like, I'm gonna trust my gut here, and I'm just gonna send it. And so I call an Uber, I sit in this Uber all the way to the middle of nowhere, North Carolina. God bless all y'all that are from Greensboro, North Carolina. And I show up to this office. It's like in the middle of some like random office park. I knock on the door, the receptionist lets me in, and she's like, hey, like, what are you doing here? What's your name? And I'm like, hi, my name's John Hu. I'm an investor at Norris Venture Partners. And I give this whole spiel. I was like, you know, I'd love to chat with one of the founders. And she's like, pretty confused. She's like, what is this random dude showing up here at? Like, what is he doing? But she's like, you know what, I'll be right back. Let me see what I can do for you. And so I'm sitting there in the lobby, like random employees are passing by, like, who is this kid? And out comes a man who I don't recognize. And he's like, hey, like, my name's Dave. I'm one of the co-founders here. I'm actually the CTO. And Dave was not someone that I'd reached out to before I'd even looked up their profile. And as part of that, I was like, hey Dave, my name's John, Norris Venture Partners. We're a $12.5 billion growth equity fund. I've been studying your space for a while. In fact, I'm literally Noregon J-Pro certified. And I've looked at every single one of your competitors. I've benchmarked the space, your technology. I've talked to all of your customers. I'd love to just chat with you and share some of the knowledge that I've learned with you in hopes of like helping you build your business. And he looks at me and he's like, you know, John, we get hit up by investors literally all the time and we never respond. But not a single person over the last 2 decades that we've been getting this interest has ever actually gotten certified in our product. So he was like, I've got a meeting in like 20 minutes, but like I'll sit down with you now because I appreciate you putting the effort. And so he takes me to the conference room like right next door. We sit down and I just put all the cards on the table. I was like, look, Dave, I talked to this competitor, I've talked to your other competitor, I've talked to some of your customers. This is the feedback on where you guys are strong, where you guys might need to grow. These are like the M&A opportunities in which you can build a broader platform with your business. And we actually get to have such a healthy discussion about his like incredibly niche semi-truck automotive diagnostic market that we sit there for not just 20 minutes, he actually cancels his meeting afterwards. And we have a full hour-long plus meeting where I learned everything about this business. And I learned that it is a like literally a crown jewel, a golden goose of a private equity business where it's like 40 million plus in ARR. It's entirely bootstrapped. It's growing 40% year over year and driving like 40% plus EBITDA margins, AKA a bunch of numbers where if you're in private equity, you know that that business is like a golden goose of a like recurring revenue business. And so think about it. I'm this like early 20s kid, so hungry to make a name for myself and like source a deal, close a deal, put it on my resume, drive some value for the firm, make a huge investment. And so I take this back to the partners. We actually start to build a relationship, and to poop on all your dreams, and it's like a lesson in life, is even though we had opened that opportunity, we end up not being able to invest because the founders just didn't want the opportunity. Like they just had enough capital. And so these are kind of the crucible moments where like I know I'd worked so hard for that opportunity, and oftentimes I think back in the day, if something like that happened, I would feel so discouraged and be like, am I really gonna close something? And I think I got really lucky where one of my VPs back in the day was just like a bigger brother to me and just like always mentored me and was always pushing me to keep going. And so he was like, John, like I've been rejected in that way so many times, but all it is, it's a shots on goal thing. It is a quantity with quality thing. And so you just have to keep putting shots on goal like that, because I promise you, if you have that kind of hustle, like you will actually make it. And so when I think about the next few years, some of the shots on goal that I actually shot that were super creative ways to get into companies that just had like absolutely no interest in talking to investors because they were doing so well. There are two specific methods that I use that I think are worth sharing with y'all because I think they're fun and creative, but also things that you can use in your own life. Number one is for some of my best companies, I would find the local Papa John's or like the local pizza service, and I would send a pizza to their office underneath the CEO's name, but I would specifically request a pepperoni pizza, and I'd have them do the pepperonis in an acronym of our name, which was NVP or like Norwest Venture Partners, and then I'd shoot them an email afterwards and be like, hey, I hope you enjoyed the pizza. Would love to take you out to an actual lunch sometime. And I got some really good company leads out of that, as well as the other thing that we used to do back in the day, which I think is like one of the most fun ways to shoot your shot, which is we would find the founder or the CEO on Venmo, and then we would Venmo them 2 cents and be like, hey, so-and-so, like, hey, Mark Cuban, would love to share my 2 cents on your business and how we might be able to help you grow it. And I think those small little ways of differentiating yourself in a super crowded market by being fun or creative or just memorable, paired with actually figuring out a way to like genuinely add value to people's lives, is exactly how I got to this last shot on goal, which actually ended up being the story that I'll tell y'all now of how I sourced the largest check we had ever written, which was $90 million. And that is also great timing because we just got to the beach. All right, so we are now here at El Porto, which is one of my favorite surf spots. It looks like it's pumping off to the right. And I figured, why not tell you guys the story of how I sourced this $90 million deal while I get ready. All right, so remember how I was saying before that the very best companies are those diamonds in the rough that are just like in the middle of nowhere? Well, this specific investment is a story just like that, where the company's name was Envisage Technologies. It was based kind of like in the middle of nowhere, Indiana, like Bloomington, Indiana, which, you know, sorry Hoosiers, isn't like the most thriving metropolis of all time. But basically this company was like a private equity investor's wet dream in terms of the market niche it was in, which was government technology compliance software, AKA multi-year long contracts, tons of like customer retention around the government itself, and then a lot of cash heavy businesses in terms of cash flow. And when I first found the company, its LinkedIn employee growth was like going crazy. It had only been started a couple years prior, yet its employee headcount at the time, I think, had grown from like just a couple, like maybe a dozen people to multiple dozens of folks. I would say like from 10 to 50 over the last few years, which is really strong headcount growth if you haven't raised capital before. And so that plus this thesis I had in general around government technology being such a great space as the government continues to digitize, just gave me the conviction that this specific business like seems super interesting and I really wanted to get in. And so the story, the fun part of how I actually got in, and pardon me as I take my shirt off, is basically I found the CEO's number and did the typical rigmarole of giving him tons of cold calls, writing him tons of cold emails, of which I probably called him dozens of times. But the problem with that was that he was what we like to call in the industry assistant gated, where his assistant owned his number and his phone. And so I could just literally never get through to him because she was always she was so great at her job of just like stonewalling me off. And so it got to the point where basically every single week on my lead tracker on like Tuesdays, I had my like call Envisage Technologies days where at like 9:30 Pacific Coast time, I would give them a call and his assistant would pick up and be like, oh, it's that time of the week again. Well, you know, I'm gonna give you the same feedback as last week. We're not interested. Please stop calling. But I just had this like gut instinct mixed with that sheer hunger I mentioned before of like really wanting to source a great deal, where I just kept doing more research on the space and learning once again more about the competitive landscape, learning more about what were different M&A targets that the company could look at to build a broader platform, and just really started to build a lot of conviction on the space, where I basically pulled in a bunch of experts on the industry, so potential industry advisors, potential board members, and then potential customers as well, and started talking to them about the market and learning more about how Envisage actually positions itself in the market. And so the way that I actually ended up getting in is I didn't do the route that so many folks do, and I think the number one mistake anyone makes in sales is they write these like awfully generic emails of like, hi, so-and-so, this is our value prop and this is our offering. And instead, and I will say this is like my 35th email to him, I wrote him a really thoughtful email breaking down his competitive landscape and like even built a slide deck with like his logo and how he matrixed on a competitive matrix and benchmarked to all of his competitors and like all the opportunities out there, and just like sent it over cold just to hope that he'd finally respond to me. And lo and behold, he actually did. And so we got on a call, I pulled in one of my partners, and we had like a 30-minute discussion where we actually learned that the business was even more interesting than I originally thought, where it was basically doubling year over year, which is like unheard of in such an unsexy, slow-moving space like GovTech. But also, because it was in government technology specifically, the way they did their procurement processes is that the government would just pay their entire, 4-year or 3-year contract up front. So the cash flow in this business, the cash EBITDA of this business was like through the roof because they'd sign these like annual recurring revenue contracts, but it'd be for 5 years. And so they get like, $30 million or $10 million upfront paid. So as you can imagine, us investors are obviously like, holy crap, we want to be a part of this business and we want to help this thing grow and really reach its full potential. But once again, if a business is generating so much cash and it's growing so well, like why would they want to do a deal? And so we start to use this other angle here that we like to call a secondary investment, where basically you're not putting more capital on the balance sheet in terms of like new capital to grow the business, but instead you start to ping the founder and ask them, hey, like what would it feel like to take 20% off the table to have a couple $1 million on the table right now? Or like, what about your old family and friends who invested? Like, why don't we get them some liquidity right now so they can celebrate supporting you super early, and then you can bring on a professional investor and we can help actually take you public or help you do M&A, because we've done that a ton before. And then wisely, for his benefit, decides to pull in an investment bank, Moelis specifically, to help them run a secondary deal because they had already had so much interest, which for us as an investor, because you want to have the shot on goal without any competition, is obviously something you don't want to happen because like you want the opportunity all to yourself. And so basically, in order to get in front of this bank process that this founder is going to start to run, which is to, maximize competition, maximize economics, which is a good thing, we're just like, screw it. We have deep conviction in this business and we do something super aggressive, which is we do something called preempting a process, where we had never actually seen the true financials of the company. We just heard from the founder that they had grown from, let's say, 17 to 35 million in ARR, and also we're doing like 40, 50% plus cash EBITDA margins, that we just chucked over, like just out of the blue over email, an indication of interest, basically a bid for the company saying like, hey, this is the valuation we put you at, let's say $200 million. We'd love to invest at least $70, $80 million in the business because we have so much conviction. But to build the tension here and to preempt the process, we put an exploding deadline there, which is like, this offer is only valid if you actually close with us and sign with us before you run this process. Basically, we pull a mission possible and we say, this message will self-destruct in a week if you don't take it. And so because we had done so much hard work through a multi-months long process of just like first begging to get our foot in the door, like me begging to get a response, and then actually doing the hard work of like understanding the market, understanding the competitive landscape, and then building a really genuine relationship with the founder. And then on top of all of that, like all of that hard preparatory work, then knowing when to get aggressive at the right time, because we had built so much conviction in the business to actually lean in. That's what actually led us to sourcing the largest check we had ever written at the time from a proprietary perspective of $90 million. But anyways, thankfully, all those days are behind me. I am an LA girly to the fullest now, so I'm gonna go surf and I'll see you guys later.